What up? What up?
Hey, mic check.
Mic check 1, 2.
Ooh, we got the CFO in the audience. We're ready to roll.
Who's the CFO?
CFO
Yeah.
Scott. We'll probably give people till about I'm guessing about 3-4 minutes, and we'll officially jump in here. I'm sure we'll say this a few times, but we do have a they don't have built-in chat rooms for stages still, right?
Oh, good point. Let's make a thread in general right now.
They do. It's on the right. If you top right of your screen, show
Ooh,
chat.
sneaky,
Oh,
sneaky. Let's go.
Bingo.
All right. Yeah, we should remind people of that. Was there anything? I don't think we got any of the pre-roll questions. All right, cool.
That.
Odin's not going to do his 2-minute stand-up routine. Help us kill some air here. Okay, just give people a couple more minutes. We'll get going here.
Bring up Eridanus. Bring them all up.
Come on down. You're the next contestant. And I got to remember how to get the how to get the lobby music going. Anybody figure that out yet? I feel like if anyone should be our resident intro DJ, it should be Pluto, but
See if we'll get the THORChain guys to join. They might just be in the audience, but maybe they can take questions in the chat.
is this working? Oh, who's that? Who's playing that? Oh, nice. Oh, you can just play stuff. Nice. All right. How do you?
That's just playing for you. I can't hear it.
Oh, anyone can mute and unmute. Got it. Got it.
Sounds are in your head and only yours.
Okay. I think we're good.
All right, so let's dive in. The purpose of this call today is just to give a brief update to the community, but also targeted at the node operators to give them all a sense of the dev roadmap and priorities for Q1 2024. So the roadmap was finalized sometime around the end of last year, beginning of this year. And so far, we've made pretty good progress on it. I don't know how we want to do this. We don't, we don't have to look at the epic or anything like that because, some of the things like, for example, Solana, there's a lot of things that kind of are going to go into that. So we can just hit the major items, kind of just one by one and just go through them and then open it up for questions. And yeah, I think, let's just start with like what we think are sort of like the top priorities for the protocol right now. Odin, if you wanted to kind of go over some of the things that we've been talking about, kind of where the guiding philosophy is around the Q1 roadmap. I don't think we can hear you. Is it just me?
Yeah. No, I can't hear you either. We'll give him a sec. Maybe he's fixing his mic or something. Yeah, just to quickly add on, like, I think we want to try to be more open and collaborative in terms of the like roadmap and prioritizations and whatnot. And so we're looking for a lot of feedback from both the community and the node operator side of things. Really like to get more of a kind of explicit either buy-in or kind of explicit feedback. If things look good, if other things should be prioritized or deprioritized, or whatnot. So that's kind of one of the big takeaways we want to get here. And so either feel free to just chat, or if there's any NOs lurking, feel free to use the make relay. And please let us know if this is like good, bad, ugly, or if there's anything that people would like to see tweaked. So, okay, do you want to try one more time? No.
No. All right. Well, I'll just start off by just talk about the P0, which I think we're all kind of aligned on. Towards the end of the last quarter in December, we saw a generally unstable period in the month of December where we were having double spends and stuck outbounds.
Test.
There we go.
There it goes. Sorry, keep on going.
For sure. Yeah. So I was just going to talk about like the P0 stuff. So the P0s for this quarter are basically anything that creates a vault insolvency, a missed inbound, a stuck outbound, erroneously rescheduled outbounds, or double spends, since those have a direct cost to the protocol, not just to the the nodes themselves in the form of bond slashes, but also reputational issues as well, and impacts from our integrators when their users swap and have any sort of delay in receiving their funds. So that's obviously the priority zero being highest for us. I think there's nothing new in terms of that way of thinking and looking at things. We're constantly going to strive towards stability and security. So I don't think we need to necessarily go into any of the explicit action items that have come out of that, but just in like the last month alone, there's probably been over a dozen PRs addressing those particular issues. We've got all the chains back online. We have chain clients that are using performance optimizations to prevent us from falling behind. We've done a lot of stuff around EVM gas, which has been, I think a large part of this problem is, the fact that like EVM chains that we're connected to have seen a large growth in their transaction throughput and in high gas fees. And so, THORChain has just had a little bit of trouble with dealing with those sort of outlier conditions around the chains that we're connected to. So a lot of stuff getting optimized around scanning EVM chains and properly, sending gas on the outbounds. I think those are probably the two biggest, but there's also just been some issues around like how we monitor vault solvency, some issues around TSS. So having, combined with having a larger validator set, having issues with the nodes coordinating on TSS. So yeah, there's been just like a plethora of issues that have surfaced, but I think in total, like it's all a good thing because we're basically just gearing up for, what some would say is a coming bull run. We're going to see more and more transaction throughput. So this is really just the, it's a good preview of what's to come for THORChain, and it's causing us to have to double down on those things and address them, early. So we hope that the renewed effort this quarter to just knock all those issues out is going to lead to a smoother 2024 where we can take the best advantage of the activity that is yet to come.
And sorry to interrupt. Really quick. That's all great. And I just thought before we started looking forward, especially we have Ursa here, I just want to do a really quick, if we could take maybe like 5 or 10 minutes and try to just do a quick look back on January and kind of highlight any of the major things that we'd like to. I think starting UTXO client work. Ursa, is your mic working? Do you want to just really quickly explain? It's pretty big, but it's also pretty detailed, and if I don't think many people besides the devs are aware, but it's a pretty big step forward. Is your mic working? Do you want to quickly talk about that?
Sure. Yeah, so the UTXO client refactoring was just moving all of the UTXO chains into a common client package. So that's more efficient. It uses batch RPCs, and there were some fundamental inefficiencies with the BTC Suite Golang package that caused load on not only the end daemons, but also just on the cluster DNS because things weren't cached properly. So all around, that's just a big efficiency gain. And with the last release, we enabled that on BTC, which was the final chain there, and then we removed 15,000 lines or so for all of the copy and pasted clients that existed before that were folded into the new UTXO package.
Yeah, that's super awesome. Yeah, huge win. And then I think everybody already knows about it, and I don't think it needs a recap. But Chad, did you want to super quickly just give a shout out for Swapper Cloud?
Yeah, sure. So Swapper Cloud was deployed in December, but we didn't actually enable it until January because we wanted to stay focused on the issues and bugs that Pluto was really referring to. But Swapper Cloud did launch, I think it was like maybe 3 weeks ago by now, or something like that, maybe 4 weeks, 3 weeks, 3 weeks. Yeah, I think 3 weeks, or maybe 2 weeks, who knows. Anyways, it allows us to be much more precise and much more of a scalpel in terms of how we apply the delayed outbound, be smarter about it to reduce the experience. I think part of the issue I think a lot of our users were having, that's maybe not clear to everybody, but it's clear to especially the 9Realms team, is that if you're swapping through a UI that's not as advanced as THORSwap is, like for example, Trust Wallet kind of has a simple interface. Once you do your trade and your swap, you really don't have a good sense of where your swap is. So when it doesn't arrive for 15 minutes or whatever, you can get a little bit nervous, right? You don't know where you put the Bitcoin in, but you haven't got your ETH out yet, right? And so getting a better UX for users was obviously something we wanted to see happen. But in general, we want to make sure that our swapping experience is as fast and efficient as possible. I think especially as more projects come online to do cross-chain swaps, and there's going to be more competition and more people kind of doing similar services. We obviously want to stay competitive in that sense and make some changes to the protocol to allow us to operate more efficiently, more quickly, and give people the best experiences we can give them.
Yeah, no, it's been super helpful. Certainly looking at the scheduled outbound queue has always been a lot cleaner lately. And so it's huge win for everybody. So.
Yep, we saw a 90x reduction in wait times on average.
Yep.
So that was very significant in its effects. I think we did when we did our analysis. Myself and Orion did analysis together, and it looked like it was going to be really effective. And I'm glad that the analysis aligned with the reality.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's been super helpful. And then it's not exactly like a single PR, but I think there's just been a lot of work trying to prevent all these various types of stuck and dropped outbounds and churning. I don't want to jinx it, but churns have been pretty smooth. So there's just been a lot of great work recently on stability and churns and making things run smoother. So yeah, I think was there any other look back stuff we wanted to touch on before I guess looking forward?
Not for Q1.
Yeah. All right. Sorry, take it away, Pluto. I just want to get through those.
Sure. So yeah, I think, going on to what is up to come for the rest of this quarter, we're obviously a third of the way through. And as we already mentioned, the majority of that has been focused on those P0 issues, but just diving into, we don't actually have to talk about them in terms of priority. They're all pretty much going to get done, and we're going to work parallel path all of them. So I think it makes more sense to just kind of discuss these things in the context of different sort of pillars of operational excellence that we're trying to achieve. this quarter. As you know, as more and more competitors enter the space, the decentralized liquidity, cross-chain liquidity space is going to heat up a lot in 2024. And so we want to be best poised to offer the best possible products and really asset infrastructure to all of our integration partners. So the three sort of pillars that we identified are price execution, so being able to offer the most competitive prices in our space. Developer experience, which is crucial for integrators who are evaluating multiple different decentralized liquidity sources at the moment. Sort of partnerships and integrations. That aspect of THORChain's BD activity have identified that developer experience is of utmost importance to those integrators when they're assessing solutions. And then finally, the execution performance. So things like Swapper Cloud, as Chad just mentioned, which enable people to receive their swaps anytime faster. That's a good example. We'll just start with that one since we're talking about it right now. So obviously, Swapper Cloud, as we mentioned, the other big one there is the batched outbounds. So batch outbounds is basically allowing TSS, instead of having to sequentially sign each TX out, to be able to sign multiple TX outs in a single transaction. And so really you'll only need to do like one TSS key sign per chain per whatever period it is that we can actually sign outbounds. So there's a lot of different chains support that in different ways. It's a little bit different on UTXO chains than it is on EVM, and it's a little bit different on EVM than it is on Cosmos-based chains. There's also a lot of work that needs, just groundwork that needs to go in. So that's going to be sort of what we're calling a slow burn task. It may or may not be delivered in its entirety during this quarter, but we're hoping to make meaningful progress on it as a parallel path to all the other things we're working on right now. So yeah, execution performance, obviously top of mind for us. We're constantly measuring those things as SLAs. How quickly are users receiving their funds after they make a swap. And there's also, different conversations that we're having internally with the security teams about what the criteria would be to relax certain security measures even further into the future to increase that performance even more. So those conversations are always ongoing, but that's one of the top priorities of the team right now.
Yeah, for batch outbound, I think the two things that I'm excited about about that concept is one, it increases the signing speed of the network to be basically close to infinity, right? It is, the limitation is no longer on TSS itself or THORChain itself. The limitation is placed on the external chain in terms of how many transactions they allow in a particular transaction. And the other thing that's really nice about it is it means that the queue will be cleared out within under a minute probably. So it doesn't really matter how large the queue is. For the most part, it'll be cleared within a minute. So that is all goes, as Pluto was just saying, that all goes towards just having a faster experience of getting your money in and your money out is like as quickly as possible, safely as possible.
Yeah, and also one other crucial thing. Right now, we use a dynamic outbound fee multiplier to determine, what the fee is. So the actual fees that people are paying on outbounds are relative to the total fees that are essentially the total amount spent on outbound fees by the network just to send everyone's transactions. So one of the pieces of feedback we get pretty consistently on the integration side is that fees are too high for EVM chains. When you do smaller swaps, THORChain is not competitive because the outbound fees are so high. If we start only sending one, basically like if we were doing just one transaction, that one large EVM transaction that contained all of the outbounds, on Ethereum, if we're only sending like one of those out per minute, we would be paying drastically less fees as a network, which would allow us to pass that savings on to the end swappers. So swappers are going to see way better price execution, especially for lower amounts with batched outbounds.
Yeah, I think that actually that's true, and that will happen. I don't think we need to make any code changes for that because of the way we track the gas that's been used so far for transactions is a dynamic thing already. So as soon as we start batching things together and putting large groups of transactions together, naturally we'll see the gas required to go down, which also means that the fees we're taking out of future swaps will be lower as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely a big one. Actually, I think is gonna.
But also, it's gonna be different per chain. Like we see a lot of Bitcoin transactions and ETH transactions, but we don't see a huge quantity of Litecoin transactions. So you may not see a whole lot of batching going on in Litecoin, or maybe like that's a better example. BCH, we said is probably better. BCH is only see a lot of transactions, and so we're probably not seeing like a huge amount of batching on that particular chain. But on the larger ones with larger throughput, of course, we'll see more.
Yeah. Speaking of throughput, I think yeah. Anyway, so yeah, let's move on to the next one. That was execution performance. Yeah, one of the three pillars we're focused on. The next one is going to be well, let's just talk about PriceX because we're kind of on that topic today. That segues nicely. So yeah, I think the major thing in terms of price execution for this quarter is going to be landing trade accounts and order books. Chad, do you want to talk about both of those and why they result in better trade execution on THORChain?
Yeah, sure. So for trade accounts, it is basically creating a new tool for arbitrage bots, primarily for arbitrage bots to utilize to be able to arb the pools. And what makes it different than using synthetics as we do today is that you effectively get a 2 times more efficient with your capital to correct pool price. Whereas in today's day and age, if with synthetics, if you were to swap $100 from Rune to Bitcoin, an R bot would have to swap $200 from Bitcoin to Rune to correct the price because of how synthetics math works. With trade accounts, it's more of a 1-to-1. So the capital that arbs have today will be able to arb the pool twice over than what they're performing today, which means that that's much more likely that the pool price and the market price are equal to each other. And if that's the case, then the price execution is top notch. So trade accounts will help us to get better price execution and make the arbs more efficient, which is really great. And then the second part is to utilize those same trade assets that arbs are using to allow the community to use order books. And the reason why that is helpful for price execution is you get to pick the price you want and just wait for it to be executed. But also it means that it creates another tool for arbitrage bots to be able to arb against swaps, and especially streaming swaps. Because now you have 2 different methodologies of arbing. You have the layer 1 arb, so you just like trade via layer 1s to arbor pool, which is the most slow and most inefficient way of doing it. And then you have the current way, which is using synthetics, which will be probably replaced with trade accounts, which is using on-chain transactions, which is much more efficient and much faster. And then you have or using order books even quicker because now you're doing what's kind of I think of it as like active arbing, whereas using trade accounts by themselves is passive. You're waiting for the pool price to change, and then you're reactively making a trade to counter the pool back to the market price. With order books and limit orders, you can accomplish the same thing, but doing it proactively, so that a streaming swap, which normally takes multiple blocks for a trade to be executed, can be done in a single block, giving you the best of both worlds between a streaming swap and a regular swap. You have the speed of a regular swap and the price execution of the streaming swap, which is just absolutely perfect.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Yeah, I think we're just breezing through these. I don't think we need to go too much into detail. Let's talk about the final pillar, which is developer experience. Dennis, I'd like to invite you to come up and talk a little bit about maybe some of the conversations you've been having on the integrations and BD front and how that's kind of informing the product requirements of the developer experience.
Absolutely. Yeah, so behind the scenes, we talk to a lot of potential integration partners. And something that we have tried to work a lot on, and we're going to put even more work into, is just making it as easy as possible to integrate THORChain. And with competition heating up, this is the time to like double down on that idea. And I think the ROI for some of these is pretty simple. You can talk about memoless transactions, for example. It's definitely the big one that's top of mind. It's again a pretty simple ROI. I mean, it's just making it easier to integrate with THORChain. So just briefly, the idea of memoless transactions is right now, to swap through THORChain, every transaction needs to include a memo. And for each different chain, it basically goes in a different place. So for Bitcoin and UTXO swaps, this goes in the op return. For EVM chains, it usually goes in, it can go in the hex data, arbitrary hex data of the transaction, or it goes in the memo field of the deposit with expiry call of the router. And then for Cosmos-based chains, this just goes in the memo field. A lot of wallets out there don't natively support, especially on the UTXO side, don't natively support including op returns in memos. And we've seen some competitors pop up that offer a way to basically do a memoless transaction, a memoless swap. And if you've swapped through Ledger, for example, and you've done it directly in their swap interface, you've probably used a service called Changelly or CIC. And if you've swapped, across many different platforms in crypto, maybe Edge Wallet, or a lot of the different wallets out there, Exodus is another example, you've seen Changelly and CIC pop up again. So Changelly and CIC, I would say they are our competitors in the centralized landscape. So they're a centralized swap service that offers a memoless transaction where instead of including a memo, you're basically just transferring tokens and you have a unique inbound address. This makes it really easy for interfaces to integrate because they just hit an endpoint with what the swap is, and they get generated a unique inbound address, and then the user is just transferring tokens to that address. And so Changelly and CIC, they have a very large footprint in this space. And now we're seeing decentralized competitors like Chainflip offer a similar service. And, I think THORChain just needs to put its best foot forward and offer something as well. And so that's where memoless comes in. And I think the technicals are, still being discussed, but it'll basically be very similar to the Changelly and Chainflip offering. And this is just basically to reduce as much friction as possible in the integration process, making it basically a simple API call. And, this is, I think, an additional step to making, THORChain the best swap experience out there. I mean, we're already probably the most decentralized option, probably the best price execution at size, especially. And, now we're going to catch up and improve on is the developer experience. And especially with, order books and trade accounts that Son of Odin was just talking about, I think we're going to be kind of unbeatable across the board. So that's kind of the idea there.
Yeah, it's interesting. When we first started to work on memoless transactions, it was not for this particular use case. It was for to allow like a very simple way of swapping from any wallet in the world. And we kind of talked about the idea that it might be used for like wallet integrations, as a kind of a lazy man's approach in a sense to integrating that. But I think what Iridanus is saying is that it's actually much more useful than I had initially considered, to be honest with you. So it's great that that feature has multiple use cases for it to be, valuable for the protocol.
Yeah, it's definitely come up like more and more in integration conversations, and even conversations with really big players where, they're scoping the work and, it's going to take some time. And then we say, well, hey, if THORChain had this memoless feature, how would this kind of help things? And it's usually, this would speed things up pretty significantly. So it's definitely, I'm really excited for this. This is probably, for me, being integrations focused, this is really top of mind and priority zero in my mind, of course, after the stability things. But I'm very excited to see how this will improve and speed up integration conversations.
Another point there on Memolist, I'm super bullish on Memolist. It'll also make it a lot easier for current integrations that already have THORChain integrations, like Shapeshift, like THORSwap, or anybody else that uses THORChain as a main swap wrap. It'll make it a lot easier for people to swap on those interfaces, because you'll essentially just have to send a transaction somewhere. You want it to connect to a wallet, which is not really a problem for EVM chains where you start on EVM, because that's such like ingrained into the experience of a swap there. But actually, especially going from Bitcoin, it's making it so you don't have to connect a wallet. It just gives you an address and you send it to, and then it just does your swap for you. So there's so many use cases for Memolist, and it'll just make integrations so much easier. But then also really level up the current interfaces for THORChain, where you can go on THORSwap or Shapeshift or wherever, and then just make a swap from any wallet, essentially. So it's really just going to level up the game in a bunch of different aspects, I feel.
Yeah, I like how I think it's going to create more competition in the wallet interface space, which is good. It's just going to create more demand and people to innovate and create better UIs, because there's just more competition. That's always a positive thing for markets. I think specifically in this case, what I'm finding very fascinating about this is that somebody could build a very simple UI that has no wallets to connect or anything like this. The wallet is extremely simple, extremely small, no bells, no whistles, just a dumb and very simple UI to make a trade or a swap. And the cost to operate that system would be extraordinarily small. It's just like, you wouldn't have to have a huge team of people. You wouldn't have to have lots of servers. You wouldn't have to have lots of things. You could just operate with such a shoestring budget that you can offer a very small affiliate fee because the cost of operation is so tiny. So it's going to be fascinating to see how that kind of how that plays out in the market after the feature comes out.
Absolutely, yeah. And Hodor in the chat asked a good question of, does a quote create new state in the nodes? And if so, could an attacker try to flood the network with quote requests without paying fees? Great question. And I think we're still discussing all the finer details, but it will require, as Familiar Cow said, it will require a message deposit with some sort of fee. It's definitely not going to be a free API call. It's very important, obviously, to kind of like reduce the ability to have a griefing attack or something like that. So it'll definitely be gated by some sort of fee, and all those. I think fee amounts are still being discussed, but yes, there will be something like that.
Awesome, guys. All right, well, you heard it here first. Those are the main priorities of this quarter. Better price execution, more performant, throughput, less time waited by swappers, and better developer experience for the integrators. Yeah, we can hit ADR-12. Let's save that until a little bit towards the end, though. I just wanted to talk about two other things that we definitely have committed for this quarter. The transition to Mimir v2 being one of them. So basically, the final step to getting rid of the admin Mimir and sort of handing over full control to the nodes. So we've already, we basically, the code for that's already landed, and now the process remains to just move all of the things that are controlled by the legacy admin Mimir over to the new Mimir v2. And for all the node operators that are listening, sometime later this month, we'll probably do a drill there. I need to tighten up the docs for that, so I'll get the docs in a good place, and then we'll basically send out some instructions to do a drill, where we'll basically ask that some node operators log in and practice flipping some of those settings. So that'll be cool to see. I think another big one that we're trying to land that we haven't talked about yet is Solana. I think the community hype around Solana, not just in the THORChain community, but in the broader crypto ecosystem, is undeniable. Sounds like everyone wants Solana, so we're going to start, or we already have started the groundwork to get that going. So we brought in a cryptography contractor. They're bringing the TSS lib EDDSA implementation up to par with the BNB chain team's implementation. We're currently in contact with the BNB chain team, discussing, basically trying to get a sense for what audits they've already done on that code. And then we're also going to contract and foot the bill for Kudelski to audit the EDDSA implementation that we will be using. So very shortly here, we should see the EDDSA support for TSS vaults landing. And then once that happens, we basically need to get Thornode and Bifrost to agree on how to process EDDSA type vaults. So one of the OG THORChain developers came back and opened an issue based on their sort of understanding of those internals, all the things that would need to be done in order to support that. It looks to be a pretty big effort. So, getting EDDSA implemented, keygens running on, with ECDSA keygens, and then getting the Thornode support, and then getting the Solana chain client itself built. There's quite a long path ahead, but that's another slow burn item that we hope to make progress toward this quarter, but of course cannot make any promises in terms of actually delivering Solana itself. So that's definitely a top priority for me, and we're going to keep working that as much as possible. Okay, I think that covers all the major items in the Q1 epic. Lending was another thing that was in the Q1 epic. So Chad, if you want to talk about the lending 12 ADR, I think that's the last thing that we have.
Yeah, so the ADR-12 is about, obviously about lending, as Pluto said. It's comprised of basically two components to it. One is changing the, to the first part first. One is burning the standby reserve of 60 million rune. That was put there from the beginning of the network as a way for the community to later decide how they wanted to utilize that. Could have put it into the actual reserve, could have done other things with it, but we wanted to put something aside. And also you also want to be able to, if you wanted to juice up the block rewards, for example. That's one way of accomplishing that task, other than the emission curve. But I think the interest that a lot of the devs have is to burn it, and by doing so, 1/3 of that burn can be used for new loans being opened up. So in total, the amount of loans that can be kind of opened up is about 25 million rune once this occurs, if it occurs, which just basically 5x's the amount of loans that are opened up. Still, it's a small percentage of the protocol itself. It's around 5% of the market cap of the asset itself, of Rune itself. So it's still quite small, if you ask me. It's not like something large, like half the supply or something like that. It's only 5%. But I think the benefit of doing that is to just collect more data and get more people taking out loans and see what their behavior is. So far, it's been really positive. Obviously, it's been a short period of time, so you really can't be conclusive about anything you see. But thus far, things are looking pretty good. I think we've only seen a couple loans close when the collateral value was lower than it was initially, and one of those was just like a test, like a $25 test or something small like that. So it wasn't even like a real loan. And out of the 600 or 700 loans that have been opened, I think something like 46 or 50 of them have been closed so far. So it's still a very small percentage of people have actually closed their loans since the beginning, which is a much lower number than I would have guessed, to be honest. So it's actually performing better than I expected in that regard. But more time is needed, more studies needed, more data needs to be collected before, and so that's part of the idea of burning the same reserves, is to kind of open up some space, allow more people to participate, collect more information, more data. The second component to it is around changing the CR. And the interest around that is we change the CR to a 200% CR or 50% LTV and just have it be a static thing. There's a few things we get out of that. One is it makes the lending protocol simpler for people to understand. It's a smaller cognitive load of like, oh, what is my TVL going to be? Or not my TVL, my LTV going to be? If it's just a static, 50%, it's easier to explain to people. People kind of know what's happening without needing to try to calculate where in a range they're going to be. And a 200% CR also means that the loans that are open are actually less risky for the protocol. That the reason why that is because in a scenario, when you open a loan, you are burning the collateral and you're minting the debt. And when you're closing a loan, you're doing the opposite. You're burning the collateral and then minting. So burning the debt and then minting the collateral. So the closer those two things are together, the less opportunity there is for a bad scenario to be bad. In those words, I'm not really doing a good job explaining this, but and it's also much more likely that a loan becomes the value of the collateral drops below the value of the debt, which means that loan is basically unclosable. I mean, technically you can actually close it if you really want to, but it wouldn't make any logical sense to do so. So in a hypothetical scenario where the market goes bear in the future, much larger percentage of the loans will be in that state, and that if they have a 200% CR than if it had a 500% CR. And so that means that a lot of loans that will not be closable in a bear market, which is what we want. And even the loans that are closable in that scenario, the amount of room that would have to be minted to pay back the collateral would be less than if it was a 500% CR. So it's far less risky for the protocol. It puts a lot more protections, and it also increases the amount of volume, the amount being passed through lending, which also means being passed through the pools. So it'll naturally generate more yield for the LPs and for the nodes by having just more volume being passed through the system. The negative is with each individual loan, the value that the network kind of extracts from that loan being opened is less. It's about half the value is contributed. So in order to be equivalent to the current system, you would need, actually, I'm not sure off the top of my head. I think it's probably about 4x. I think it's 4x. I have to do the math out, but I think it's 4x the amount of trades to equal one trade of 400% CR or something like this. And so you have to get more volume. It's kind of similar to streaming swaps. Like in a streaming swaps, you are giving less yield. The protocol is getting less value out of a streaming swap because they're paying less yield, but you're also getting a more volume of trades because you're providing less, you're charging less fees, right? And it's conceptually a bit similar to that, right? And so I expect we'd see a larger volume, but we get less value on a per loan basis. In the end, because the whole thing is capped anyway, it doesn't really matter if it's 400%, 200%, or 100%. At some point, most likely, I'm guessing that the caps can be hit. And at that point, we maxed out the benefit we can pull from those loans. And it doesn't matter if it's 200% or 3% or 400% at that point. It only becomes in potential issues if there's just not much demand for loans at some point. Like there's been dried up, right? And I don't think that's likely to be the case. I think if we go from 400%, which we are today right now, to 200%, we are basically competitive with the highest LTVs that exist within lending in general. And so I think we've kind of removed one of the largest barriers for people using lending today is the lower LTV that we give them. I have a friend of mine who actually has a huge loan out with an Ethereum loan out on a different protocol on Ethereum, and he doesn't close his loan and reopen on THORChain because the LTV is not as good, right? So I think we're going to see a lot more drive or more commitment from the community to see more loans being opened because it's a better deal, not just for the borrower, but it's a better deal for the protocol as well.
Yeah, and one thing I want to point out that another user mentioned in a thread, but that I thought was a good point, is that by lowering the CR at this time, it does create an incentive for people to close out their loans and open new ones at a better CR. And so in general, I'm thinking, it's probably like having the dynamic CR where, it's floating up and down and up and down. It creates too much incentive to like try to, close your loans to get like a better rate, so to speak. But since like there's already no interest rate, like we really just want the product to just have as little incentive as possible to like actually close your loan. And so lowering the CR now, lowering the CR now does create that incentive to close loans, but keeping it fixed at 200% into the future basically means that we're not going to, create that incentive again. So now seems like a good time if there are people that are going to close their loan and take advantage of it to do that. And so basically we'll remove that sort of psychological effect going forward by keeping it fixed. We do have, there is a lot to talk about lending, but I did want to keep this forum relatively focused on just the immediate Q1 roadmap and priority. Also because, I want to keep the duration of this short, as we know that node operators are, busy people. So just getting them to sit down and listen to this 45-minute recording will, if they make it all the way through, I think that would be great. So let's try to wrap it there. We can talk more about lending in the ADR-12 thread and at the next Twitter Spaces, which I'm not sure if we're doing one today. Possibly Cal can weigh in on that. But Akila, did you just want to give one final sort of call to action for the node operator community in terms of what we're trying to accomplish by doing these stages?
Yeah. Obviously this is definitely for everyone, but we just historically, I think haven't gotten as much explicit feedback from node operators on kind of approval or happiness or just like overall alignment with dev priorities. And so we're going to try to be much more active this year in actively soliciting feedback, even if it's just a thumbs up or looks great or no comment. Any sort of make relays would be very, very, very helpful. So I would just like to request anybody listening or that listens to the recording at any point, or at any point over the next few weeks, months, whatever it is, if there's something you think should be a priority or something that should not, or if you're just happy, it's kind of like a no comment, we'd even appreciate just kind of like a happy thumbs up, even if it's just hey, no comment, but happy with how things are going. That would also be very helpful. So that was just kind of a request from everyone, just to try to get a little more explicit feedback. Thanks, appreciate it.
Hey, Pluto, one more thing is the Binance Beacon chain sunset. Do you want to just quickly say what's going on with that?
Yeah, for sure. So basically, we've already reached out to all the Binance teams and basically made them aware of the decision to shut down the BNB Beacon chain integration at the end of the month. I think they think that that's reasonable. So we basically given all of the LPs, node operators, UIs, the green light to start messaging to their customers that now is the time to pull your BNB and BUSD from and a couple other assets, but basically to pull the BEP2 LP positions because at the end of this month we're going to start the process to formally Ragnarok the chain. And I'm not sure yet whether we actually want to do a real Ragnarok and attempt to send all the funds back to users. Personally, and for the sake of simplicity, I would prefer to just specify a certain block, and then after that, there's no more Binance vaults at all, and just wipe them. But that might be controversial, but that would be the most secure and least potential room for error for path forward for the protocol. So we'll basically see how much liquidity is left in the pools. And if it's a de minimis amount, we might just make to just essentially do like a ban within it, because that's just it's a delicate process, and we want to avoid having to do it whenever possible. And I think that giving people 1 month heads up 1 month prior to the Well, we can even just push out if we do decide to do it that way, we can push it out further. But I think the actual technical implementation of that has yet to be decided. So we'll kind of punt on that for now, but that's also happening. And someone is typing really loud.
Sorry.
Oh. All good. So yeah, guys, thanks for joining, and we hope that this was a useful session for everyone.
Oh, we got one question from Mogarki in the channel before we kill anything here. Mogarki asked 2 questions. Yes, one about the concepts of haircuts. I think he's referring to trade accounts or trade assets more accurately. So the haircut concept is just that in the event that, so the assets that are being held as part of trade accounts is just Bitcoin being held by the network outside of the pool. Historically, we haven't done this before because any assets that are outside of the pool are not economically secured by the nodes in a sense, or at least if they're economically secured, but not, you lose economic security basically, because you can arbitrarily put as much Bitcoin outside the pool as you want, which is obviously irrespective to the amount of security in the network, which would be obviously problematic. And so the way to address that particular problem is that in the event that the value of the assets in all the vaults exceeds the value of the rune, right, on the rune side, of the security side, the bond, then a negative interest is applied or a haircut is applied to the trade assets. So that's just to create a small incentive for them to start exiting or lose some money. That haircut would be, to be honest, probably quite small. Like, we don't need to panic. Like, most protocols just operate that way all the time. They have no care if the security is lower than the actual value of the assets is. So there's no opportunity or risk of getting settle-tacked, in that scenario. If you were, it would take you probably 6 months to do it. Like, it's not an easy task to do. It takes a lot of capital and a lot of time to actually do an attack like that. It's probably actually more than 6 months. It's probably closer to 9 or 10. So we don't need to be too aggressive about it. We just need to say, here's a little incentive to exit the funds, right? To do so. But in that scenario, like the LPs and the savers would probably be earning 0 because the pendulum would swing entirely to the nodes. And so the LPs would probably be leaving, which is also withdrawing assets from the network, which would inherently make the trade assets probably, more viable. So I think that's what Mogarki was asking for. I'm not sure if he's referring to a different haircut than that, because there's a few in the protocol, but that's one. So the second question he asked was about what is the worst case scenario for lending and why is the FUD wrong? Worst case scenario for lending, let me think about that. The worst case for lending is that in its current iteration would be that all the loans close. There's some sort of bank run of some kind. Everybody closes all their loans because they don't trust lending for one reason or another. And we mint back all the rune that we burnt, and then we will probably spend some amount of rune from the reserve. Will we spend the entire reserve? No, that's very unlikely. You would need to see rune at like 10 cents or 12 cents to see that happen. I mean, if rune's at 12 cents, then that's obviously a very different extreme scenario, but I don't think that's a reasonable scenario, to be honest with you, not personally. But the change in the CR to 200% kind of helps in that scenario. The other change that I want to see happen in the long term is have it so that when you burn a derived asset, which is what lending is using, you can pay a haircut in that scenario, in the scenario where the value of all the derived assets together in rune is greater than the amount of rune that's missing from the protocol. So if we burnt out 100 million rune from the protocol, we got 100 million rune, that's, we only got a supply of 400 million, the max supply is 500 million, we got 100 million missing, and the total value of all the derived assets is 110 million, right? That would basically mean that when you close your loan, you get basically like a 10% haircut, more or less, of your collateral, right? And that effectively means that, like, if everybody closed their loan in that scenario, we would only ever mint back to the 500 million. We would never go to $550 million, because you would just pay the haircuts on the way out. And what I really love about this concept is that it is a really good counterbalance to a bank run in that scenario, right? Because if there's a bank run there, that it's the weight of the bank run that solves the bank run, right? It's almost like in UST's case, if everybody exiting the token caused the token to repeg, it's conceptually a little bit similar to that in some ways, at least. So it creates the risk and the liability away from the protocol, away from rune holders, away from anybody who's engaged in the protocol in that sense as a rune holder, and it puts the weight on the borrower to either make a determination to close your loan before it gets to that line, which case it helps the protocol, or you can do it after the case, which it also helps the protocol to do it in that case after you cross that kind of line. So and no matter how you slice it, it just makes the network safer in that regard. Hopefully that's answered Mogurki's question.
Cool. It looks like he's typing, but I think this can be taken to the further discussion in the ADR thread. So let's just go ahead and end it here. Again, thanks everyone for coming. We'll do another one of these at the end of the quarter to kind of do a quarterly review and to also discuss the next quarter's roadmap. Thanks everyone for joining.
Cool. Thanks, guys.